Grimlavamancer and Pyroblast and such can have a much bigger impact. So off to the races here. Tony starts with, looks like a fetch land, I can't tell which one, against an Aether Vial for David.
Looks like a Misty Rainforest there.
Yeah, it is a Misty. So no Noble Hierarch or Green Sun to start it off for Tony.
Yet.
Just yet, right. One thing that I actually I realized just as we were sort of cutting into this match, one card that makes a big difference for the Blazing Shoal deck that exists in Legacy but not in Modern is Wasteland.
Yes.
Wasteland makes the Inkmoth Nexus much easier to deal with in the early turns of the game, where it is a much harder threat in Modern.
So it looks like that Aether Vial was not going to fly for Tony, and he's willing to return the tropical island he found with his Misty Rainforest in order to daze that.
And then a Wooded Foothills comes down. Then David deploys. Looks like Stoneforge Mystic. So David, he has a few different equipment he can get. He has Batterskull, Jitte, and Sword of Fire and Ice.
Yep, that's a pretty standard suite for most of the standard for the most of the Stoneforge Mystic decks.
And it looks like, given that he knows that Tony has, it looks like Tony has been playing. Yeah, that's exactly what I would expect him to get. Would be Jitte here. While Batterskull is very powerful against creature decks that are primarily attempting to attack your life total. Against a deck like No Rug, you really want to be able to keep their creatures under control. You want to be able to kill Dryad Arbor so they can't use it as a natural order sack outlet. And Jitte is the best card to do that.
Yep. And having seen Misty Rainforest and Wooded Foothills, he correctly calls that's what he's up against.
Yep. So Tony's turn to fetch again. And I'm guessing a Tarmogoyf is likely coming out of this, as it's the typical 2-mana play.
And at this point, David's got to know exactly what he's playing against.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are some Threshold Nimble Mongoose type decks that
the Canadian
are also
Threshold,
rogue,
but
so Fire. David reading in a split card,
making sure that card still works.
So David untaps and looks like he draws another Stoneforge Mystic.
Yep.
So the second Stoneforge Mystic, I will probably get maybe Sword of Fire Ice. You could get Batterskull here, depending on what he needs for his creature situation. But yeah, I think Sword of Fire and Ice is more likely.
He shifted the Batterskull to the top.
I think that's a sword up there.
Yep.
Yeah. So he gets the
Batterskull.
Batterskull.
He decides to get the Batterskull.
So his opponent has used one piece of removal on his first Stoneforge. That makes it that much less likely that he can remove the second one. And if the Stoneforge lives for a single turn, he'll get the Batterskull into play.
Yeah, it's really about whether or not the Stoneforge lives. If Batterskull is a good choice here, because the sword you can play cold, but you better be able to.
Well, if nothing else, he forces his opponent to use his mana this turn to remove the Stoneforge Mystic. Even if his opponent, we see Tarmogoyf.
Yep, and there's the Dryad Arbor.
So here we David can. He has a land. He can certainly deploy his Batterskull. He could just cast his Jitte and then end step the Batterskull.
Now that Tarmogoyf has got instant, land, creature, and artifact.
Yes,
so it's already
there is an Aether Vial as well. So he actually just chooses to suit up and get going. All right, so he's not going to put the Batterskull into play. He's actually just going to start building counters on his Jitte and kill that Dryad Arbor, which makes a lot of sense. As we were saying before, the scariest thing that the No-Rug deck can do is actually just natural order. And with 3 land, one of them being Dryad Arbor, Tony was threatening Progenitus next turn.
Yep.
And David's safest play there is to remove the Dryad Arbor. So this looks like Green Sun for 1. So that gets Noble Hierarch. There, I don't believe, is another 1-cost creature in Tony's deck. And Noble Hierarch is just going to die. So Noble Hierarch goes down to the Jitte counter.
But Tony's got to be reaching for something here, because it looks like he's short on land and needs to start getting something out.
Yeah, he's in a pretty tight spot here. Facing down to Jitte is not where you ever really want to be. So it looks like David has Caracas, and he can send that Stoneforge Mystic in.
Hits for another 1, taking Tony down to 16.
Yeah, 2 counters on that. Oh, and that's a Jotun Grunt.
I think that's an overlooked creature in Legacy right now. It showed up in the blue-white tempo decks a couple years ago, but it really hasn't done a whole lot.
Oh,
and at this point, Tony
just packs it in the face of the Jitte dominance.
And the Rishadan Port was just exacerbating his mana troubles.
Yep. So going to the sideboard here, looks like David has an Enlightened Tutor-based sideboard. He has tutors. He has Leonin Arbiter. Leonin Arbiter is an interesting card against the Green Sun Zenith deck. He has he can help try and shut down the many fetch lands that Tony Chu is playing, as well as Green Sun Zenith and Natural Order if that Arbiter stays in play. I think Arbiter will likely come in. It's also Arbiter's a particularly scary card in combination with Aether Vial, because if you're sitting with an Aether Vial at 2, you never know when your opponent might put an Arbiter into play and have you stuck with the inability to actually pay for the search.
And
search
David's deck is built to leave Aether Vial at 2.
It is an Aether Vial deck, and he wants to have Vial on 2, putting out things like Sarah Avenger, Phyrexian Revoker, Stoneforge Mystic. He does have Flicker Wisp and Mangara of Coriander to go for at 3.
Yep.
But there's very little incentive to do that when he can stick his opponent with Arbiter.
He is not hurting when he's sitting on 2. Got lots of options.
Right. So it doesn't. I doubt he would be bringing in any of his tutor package here. He does have a Phyrexian Metamorph, which I can imagine him bringing in to be able to deal with Progenitus if it does resolve.
Now, Circle of Protection Red is a source of choice.
It is. You can COP Red of Progenitus. That is certainly true.
So that is a possibility, but I'm not sure that's a plan. I think the plan
doubt,
is probably beat Tony before he can play Progenitus.
Right, that's the direction you want to go. You generally, when you're playing a deck like this, you don't want to dilute your deck with a lot of purely reactive cards. I mean, if you look at Tony's deck list, which we can do, and you at home cannot, and you'll see that he has a bunch of creatures, and then he has Swords to Plowshares, Batterskull, Jit, Sword, Aether Vial, and a single Cataclysm, and that's it. He doesn't have a deck that's diluted by any sort of
That's
reactive
David's
effect.
deck, just to clarify.
I
think we crossed over on names. So David's Death and Tax is definitely very creature-based, not a whole lot of reactive. His job is to get through there, get it done, and just knock his opponent out.
So I definitely think those Leonin Arbiters are going to be coming in. What exactly he takes out, I'm not entirely sure. Phyrexian Revoker seems like it's pretty marginal here. Tony doesn't really have much in the way of activated abilities on any of his permanents. He has Noble Hierarch, but I think Phyrexian Revoker is probably the most likely candidate to get cut for those Arbiters.
I would think so. But let's take a look at Tony's deck. What are we looking at coming out of the board here?
Well, Tony has Grim Lavamancer. That's his absolute best cards here are Lavamancer and Jace. Jace is a card that the mono white deck has very little ways to actually beat if it can stick in play. David needs to protect a creature with Mother of Runes or just get multiple guys in play. That's actually, he doesn't know whether his opponent has Jace in his deck, but the Phyrexian Revokers are a reasonable answer to Jace. That's actually something in the main deck. He didn't see any use for it, but he may anticipate that his opponent has Jace either in his main deck or his sideboard.
Yep.
So I think that Grim Lavamancer and Jace are the cards that I'd be looking at possibly playing here. In his main deck, the Scavenging Ooze is pretty unimpressive. He's certainly never going to want to go digging in a graveyard in this matchup.
Yep.
Force of Will is one of those cards that people are very hesitant to sideboard out, but I think probably wants to get out of here in this matchup. He doesn't have that. He doesn't really want to trade 2-for-1 against Tony's deck.
He's not running enough control to really be that scared of a resolved Aether Vial.
Right.
It's not an end game for him.
Right. So I mean,
he doesn't want to see it, obviously, because it really facilitates David getting out and ahead. But if he gives up the Force of Will in order to bring in some better answers, then that may be the way to go.
Yeah. He absolutely wants to just Progenitus and win with it. If you look at the way that this sort of matchup works out, it's possible that actually sort of thinking about it again that the Force of Wills are good enough because they can stop whatever early stuff Tony might be able to do in order to stop, or rather that David may be able to do in order to actually stop him from resolving representatives. So it looks like we're ready for game 2 underway.
Looks like Tony opens up with a wooded foothills into a volcanic island.
And
that kind of
I would
means
expect
he's got no opening play unless he's got his Lavamancer.
A Lavamancer here would be... Lavamancer early against this white deck is pretty strong. There aren't many creatures in the deck that can survive it in the early turns.
Most of the times you're going to see Tony going for... Yeah,
and
there
it is.
Most of the times you're going to see the tropical island, the blue-green land coming out. But it's pretty big tell that he's going to be getting out that Lavamancer since he went and got the volcanic.
An M12 Lavamancer, no less.
Oh. Aether Vial from David, and he's off to a start as well.
Yeah. Aether Vial, one of the more important cards that David can have to fight against that Lavamancer. The ability to deploy his threats without using his mana it can definitely get him. He's still going to be behind the card advantage potential of the Lavamancer. But if he's forced to play out threats one at a time using his mana, he really just won't be able to sort of force past the Lavamancer at all.
The other key is he can make Tony use the Lavamancer later.
Right.
Because if he's playing them at sorcery speed, then the Lavamancer can pick it off, and then when he passes the turn, just untaps again and is ready to go and eat somebody else. Whereas in this case, with the Aether Vial, dropping it on Tony's turn just puts him a little bit on his back foot.
He can make it so Tony's mana usage is much more constrained. So Lavamancer, being able to use Lavamancer whenever he wants, lets David sort of pick and choose. Okay, well, I'll leave up mana here because I want to play this. I'll hold mana for that. But if David can play end step creatures, he's able to pressure the Lavamancer much better. So Lavamancer, another card that Phyrexian Revoker actually answers very well. So sort of the more that I think about the cards that while David didn't see in game 1, he could suspect out of Tony's deck, the more I think that Phyrexian Revoker actually probably is a card he does want to keep in his deck.
Well, it may also be something where, based off of what he'd seen out of Tony's deck, he did not leave him in.
Right.
And now that he sees, Lavamancer, if he sees a Jace later on, says, you know what, I think those guys should be coming back in. I'll be excited.
Swords of Plowshares does take out that Lavamancer before it can do any damage.
We've got a question from MMONAJ on Twitter, and they're asking if SCG Atlanta is a 3X Planeswalker point event. And yes, the StarCityGames.com Open Series, they are all WPN Premium events, which has that 3X modifier. So it's a really good way to pick up some more points, grind some more points. Good big events, long events, high participation points.
We had 600 players for Standard yesterday, and over 200 today for Legacy.
250 today. So
big turnout for all of these events. And then the draft opens as well.
Absolutely.
If Legacy isn't your thing, Day 2 features not one but 2 draft open events that
are both 3X multipliers.
Yep. And I believe this is the last M12 one. Starting with the next one, we will be Innistrad, so a whole new draft format.
Yep.
So Tony with a Green Sun Zenith for 2, fetching Tarmogoyf. And David
seems a little anxious to get going.
Wants to untap. or wants to shuffle.
And David's got that die on top of his library to remind him that he can add that counter to... looks like Tony's going to be gaining a little bit more life.
So Plow gets Force of Willed.
Ooh.
Huh.
So what are we looking at with this Tarmogoyf? We've got the Swords of Plowshare. We've got a graveyard in Tony's hand that we can't see.
So it looks like Aether Vial ticked up to 2, I'm guessing.
Yep.
And I see, looks like Stoneforge Mystic and I think Mother of Runes in David's hand.
Yeah, there was a Jitte in there as well, I believe. Stoneforge Mystic, Mother of Runes, flipping around there. Yep, there's a Jitte on top now. And he passes back over. So the Rishadan port is going to shut down the tropical island. And Ancient Grudge seems to have made its way in from the board.
That makes a lot of sense. David's deck has quite a few artifacts in it, both the Aether Vials and the full collection of equipment. So that Ancient Grudge is actually quite good here. It takes out the Aether Vial, which David uses to Stoneforge Mystic. But whenever he gets
hiding
Mystic,
in the graveyard, ready to knock out whatever comes in.
Can be taken out by that Grudge that's just waiting for the next one.
Yeah, Flashback's pretty good, I've heard.
Ancient Grudge is one of the most powerful flashback cards out there. It's a card that sees play even in Vintage.
Yep.
It's just I will kill this and kill this for incredibly low mana cost, incredible flexibility. The two artifacts don't have to be in play at the same time. Rack and Ruin was a card from Urza's Saga. That was
getting rid of two.
A very powerful card, and this is basically Rack and Ruin on layaway.
Yeah,
you can rack that, then ruin that later.
Yep. And so with Flashback coming back in Innistrad, do you think you're going to see some cards that make an impact here on the Legacy circuit?
Maybe. I mean, it's hard to say. Flashback is a mechanic that it depends very much on the efficiency of those cards. Legacy, so much of the format is about sort of the raw value you're getting for the cost that you're paying.
Nope.
And you see. It's one of the reasons that you see so many creatures in Legacy are creatures from recent past, because creatures have just gotten so much better. You're just getting so much more for your cost, your cost that you pay than you used to.
Yep.
I mean, some of the utility creatures like Mother of Runes, they just give an effect that you just haven't seen. But in terms of the size of the body you're getting, the recent years is really the best you got.
Yep. And so it looks like David dropped a Phyrexian Revoker, so those must have stayed in. Maybe he was thinking ahead of us there. And Tony came back in with Tarmogoyf, which right now is instant land and artifacts in the bin, so it's hitting for 3.
So do we know what's being revoked? Is it Jace Lavamancer? So that Revoker is... And Revoker's attacking, as is Stoneforge Mystic.
It's a 2/1. And so Tony, a little bit of confusion about when exactly he was sacrificing the Wooded Foothills. Clears it up that he's sacrificing it after their attackers.
And here comes a Dryad Arbor.
So David has effects before that Dryad Arbor can jump in front of the Revoker. So whatever its Revoker is naming Ancient Grudge.
That Revoker can't name Ancient Grudge, can it?
Revoker can name any
name
card,
anything, but it doesn't do anything.
Give me just a second to verify whether or not it does anything.
I don't think it does anything. It's not an activated ability.
It is not. You're casting it directly from the graveyard.
Yeah, so Revoker naming Ancient Grudge actually has no effect.
Didn't do all that much.
It's illegal play.
Yep.
So,
and we seem to have some confusion about...
I don't know. Is there a life total discrepancy? Or sideboard? Was he trying to fetch for something and he couldn't find it? I'm a little confused.
It is at this point, when there's this much hand gesturing, that a hand should go up and... Oh, and it looks like we have involved the judge. That's exactly the right thing to do there. Something comes up, you don't know what to do. You want to get the judge involved.
Can we get a possible word? We're going to try and figure out what's happening here.
As soon as we have a follow-up.
As soon as we know anything, we'll let you know.
We will pass it along to you. All right. So we have a resolution, and it looks like we're going to be continuing the game here.
I think it may have had something to do with whether he had shuffled after the fetch land or something. Here comes Tarmogoyf.
That's kind of what it does.
So I'm actually a little confused. Shouldn't the Dryad Arbor be dead? Didn't it?
The Dryad Arbor did not block.
What happened to Phyrexian Revoker?
It was Ancient Grudge, I believe.
No, Ancient Grudge is in the graveyard still.
There's actually 2 Ancient
There's
Grudges
2
in the
Ancient. Oh, so
graveyard.
it was Ancient Grudge.
Yes. So,
Okay, so apparently confusion. There was a face-down card just on the table, and the players were trying to figure out where it came from.
and I believe it was a card that was just played.
Ah.
But since it was an Ancient Grudge, and there was already one in the graveyard, got a little confused because they thought, oh, it's already in the graveyard.
Gotcha. All right, so it looks
Daze seals it up for Tony Chu.
and we're going to game 3.
Yep, we'll be moving on. And David Winsaver will be on the play here in game number 3. And we've got to expect that he'll be leading off with an Aether Vial, or at least hoping to.
That's certainly his plan. So obviously, so we talked about the cybering possibility before, and they did not go exactly how we had thought. Ancient Grudge definitely was a card that certainly should have come in and played a very big role in that game.
Absolutely,
taking out multiple creatures, multiple artifacts, and both players going back to their sideboard. Gavin and I have actually been talking through much of the weekend about the value of changing your sideboarding strategy based on whether you are on the play or on the draw. And you have to wonder if these players are taking that consideration here. You know, for instance, a card like Daze in Tony's deck is dramatically better in this matchup if he's on the play, and actually pretty bad if he's on the draw, because most of his opponent's deck are cheap threats.
Yep.
So I have to imagine that there's a good chance he's taking it out.
Yes,
in the draw.
You'd have to hope. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about.
Right.
A lot of people say, here is my...
They have a sideboarding plan for a matchup, and they sort of adhere strictly to that plan. And that's while that can be a relatively successful strategy, that's certainly not the best plan. The best plan is to adapt your sideboarding strategy both to the specifics of your opponent's deck. So if you have a plan against, say, well, this is how I sideboard against no rug. It's like, well, if you play against a no rug deck that has different cards than those that you typically play against, your plan needs to go out the window. Your plan needs to at least be adapted to what your opponent's actually doing compared to what you sort of expect him to do in a hypothetical world.
I look at a lot of deck lists every week, and just because it's called Callblade or No Rug or Blue-White Stoneblade doesn't mean it's exactly the same deck. There is a great amount of variance between different lists, and people have their pet cards. People have their specific builds that they like, and it fits into a certain archetype, but that does not lock it into a specific list.
I mean, you see that very much in Standard these days with,
Certainly.
Over the past few months with the variations in Cobblade in particular. Yep. You see some Cobblade decks that have 4 Jaces. You see some Cobblade decks that have no Jaces. You see some Cobblade decks that have no Blades. You see some Cobblade decks that have Blade Splicer and Hero of Blade Hold. They're, mono Blade.
And so it looks like McCallat88 picked up and has a little bit more information for us. That random card on the battlefield was actually the bottom card of Tony's deck that was left there after he shifted it back over.
Gotcha. So
didn't realize that card was missed as he
shuffled
was
the deck and handed it over, and there was a card missing.
Yep.
So.
As he was moving it back to his normal place right by his left hand.
So these players shuffling up, getting ready for game 3.
So we've got another question about the Planeswalker points, and so Aggro Combo is asking us, you keep saying that the Open Series is 3x Planeswalker points, but I only have 1x from my old Star City events. So WPN Premium events just started for this year, and so unless it was marked as a WPN Premium event, which would be starting as of January this year, and unfortunately excluding Baltimore because there were some mistakes made with that one that left it as a non-WPN Premium event, it's going to be a 3x. So some of your older ones, they are going to be 1x because the WPN Premium events, that designation simply didn't exist at that point in time.
It is actually sort of funny going back and looking at the results from old tournaments. My very first tournament was Pro Tour 1 in the junior division, where I got 192 Planeswalker points. So,
all right.
Off to a good start. And speaking of good starts, here's the start of Game 3. Tony Chu plays out a Noble Hierarch, which immediately gets swords by David Winsaver.
David looked like he really wanted to do something with that.
He was just like, I got a mana. I got to use it. So
didn't get a chance to...
2 mana, gets Leonin Arbiter.
And
So this could potentially be a serious problem for Tony Chu. I don't see what he has in his hand right now, but I don't think he has a land that is not a fetch.
Now, what's interesting is we were talking about how you wanted to take the Dazes out. That would have been a devastating Daze right there.
Oh, it certainly would have been an important Daze. The impact of Leonin Arbiter, can be pretty huge here.
Yep.
Tony Chu currently doesn't have access to any more mana-producing land. All of his lands are fetches. He may have, I think, a Dryad Arbor in his hand, but he has nothing that actually lets him cast a spell this turn. And he brainstorms, and it looked like he didn't find any more. So,
well, there's the Dryad Arbor. So
if David Winsaver has a wasteland or just another source supply, there it is.
Kill it.
So look at how powerful this Leonin Arbiter is. It's actually sort of interesting how much more of an impact that Leonin Arbiter has had on older formats than it had on Standard. Leonin Arbiter is a card that a lot of people had fairly high hopes for in terms of being able to fight Valakut decks, Primeval Titan decks and whatnot. But those decks often have enough sorts of ramp spells that don't require them to search their library that they're able to afford the extra mana.
Yep, and there's a Rishadan Port, and he's just gonna.
This is gonna be brutal.
This may be an I attack you 10 times with a Leonin Arbiter win.
Yeah, this is where the taxes part of Death and Taxes comes from what I understand. The ability to pin the opponent's mana.
Now
we see another brainstorm.
There's Mangara.
So Tony Chu cannot afford to have his one land that can actually do anything destroyed by Mangara.
Tony looking at his hand, digging,
trying to find
frantically to find answers. He has a Fire Ice in his hand,
but he
so
can't
if he can
cast
find
it.
that second, he needs to find a red mana in order to do.
And it looks like all the land that he have are fetches. It looks like he is on mono fetch mana base here, and I'm guessing that Tropical Island is not long for this world.
You've got to think when you've got the chokehold,
so
you gotta.
And Mangara is
interesting. Mangara sitting back at this point,
so he doesn't want to attack with it, but also isn't using it. So is that Caracas that he just drew, or is that a basic plains? No, it's a basic.
That's basic plains. Those are out of looks like the Urza Saga plains.
So Leonin Arbiter comes in.
David
again.
Trying to decide if he wants Leonin Arbiter to go on his own. Looks like Mangara is going to come in. He's going to settle for porting out the Tropical Island during Tony's upkeep.
So we have a correction on Twitter. Apparently, David's last name is Winsaver, not Winsaver. It's a U that we have as a V right there. Kind of looks like a V to me in his deck list. But, I can see an argument
that could go either way. So we apologize, David. That's our mistake.
We have it fixed to you right now. So, and a wasteland. So, well, now we're attacking, and now we're wastelanding. So Tony Chu has access to no mana. He has nothing but fetch lands facing down a Leonin Arbiter. He is basically just completely mana locked by that Arbiter.
Yep, and discards a card. Nothing to do here. Just standing there and getting hit.
Here come the dopey hate bears that are keeping him locked down. And there it is. That's the game. So, wow. Leonin Arbiter goes all the way after just coming down turn 2 and completely stranding all of Tony Chu's fetch lands.
Yep. And aggressive mana bases, especially that use a lot of fetch lands, can